List off in 3, 2, 1.
Hey there, writing cadets! Welcome back to the Moving Right Along podcast, the podcast by young writers for young writers. We're your hosts, Ruby,
Ray,
and Kat. Last episode, we talked about romance tropes and our thoughts on it, and we discovered Ruby and Ray have pretty much the same taste in tropes, and they're pretty much the same person. Today, we'll be continuing that theme with a super special guest. Drum roll, please. Everyone, please. Yeah, it didn't really work for drum roll, but we live with what we've done. Everyone, please welcome the one and only Allison Saft. Allison, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Allison Saft, and I'm the author of Down Comes the Night and the upcoming A Far Wilder Magic. I write what I call eerie romantic fantasy, so books with a little bit of spooky atmosphere and lots of yearning. And when I'm not writing, I spend my free time training to join the circus.
which I'm still shaken about. That is so cool.
Yeah, do a little bit of the aerial silks, so the fabric. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
My toxic trait is thinking I could do that. Okay. Thank you so much for being here. We are very, very excited. And our last episode brought a lot of questions about romance tropes, so we figured who better to have than the author of the one and only Down Comes the Night, which is amazing.
Yes. And for those who don't know, Down Comes the Night is an award-winning gothic YA fantasy about a healer hired to cure her kingdom's sworn enemy from a mysterious disease. We still love hers. Just by the way. Yeah, and we all love Down Comes the Night. We all enjoyed it so much. Ren, the main character, honestly, I connected with so easily. She's just so relatable in the best way possible. And I just love following her and following Hal. Oh, I love Hal. I love Hal as well. But we all really enjoyed it.
Ruby loves Hal. It was just like message after message, and we were like, okay, we get it, Ruby. But yeah, no, it was really amazing.
Yeah, it was incredibly well written. I honestly loved, I'm not going to spoil anything, but I loved the way you wrote Hal's character and the way he warmed up to everything and the message of forgiveness and it was so perfect.
Oh, thank you.
And you also have another book coming out soon. Jasmine and Simone have both pre-ordered it already. As soon as I get some money, I will also do the same. But what can you tell us about A Far Wilder Magic?
So A Far Wilder Magic is a 1920s inspired fantasy romance about, I usually pitch it as two outcasts who team up to win a hunt for the last living mythical beast. It's a very quiet, intimate story, kind of in the vein of Maggie Stiefvater's The Scorpio Races, a little bit of Full Metal Alchemist, and it's got a sunshine romance, one of my favorite tropes, and a Jewish protagonist.
That sounds so good. Well, we're all very excited to read it. But we wanted to, while you're here, to get to know the characters of Down Comes the Night and A Far Wilder Magic a little better. We wanted to do a little fun game of Who's Most Likely To, Allison Saft Character Edition. So, for your first, and this is, of course, assuming that they lived in our world, who is most likely to end up on a reality show?
Oh, I feel like Hal, I could see him as the most awkward bachelor in history. I'm gonna go with that.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Instead of eliminating them, he just kills them.
Oh my gosh! Most awkward and deadly bachelor.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, iconic. The best Besrian television show. I love it. I'm ready for the epilogue.
So, which of your characters do you think is most likely to get scammed?
Oh, probably Wes from A Far Wilder Magic. He's a very human embodiment of sunshine character who wants to believe the best of people.
Oh, I love that. That's adorable. Who is most likely to be a theater kid?
Also was. He has ambitions of being a politician and loves attention. So I say this as a former theater kid myself.
Got
I
it.
agree.
No, I love that. Who's most likely to be an influencer?
Una. I think Una would run like a very cool Instagram.
It would be a fitness one, I feel like.
She would absolutely be a fitness influencer.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Oh yeah, I was thinking in my head that like her theme song would just be like, you know, The Rock. It's about drugs, it's about power. Like lifting weights to it.
Yes. Oh my God. Like a little thirst trap video. Oh my God, no,
Yeah.
this is.
Oh man.
Which of your characters do you think is most likely to accidentally poison someone with their terrible cooking?
Ren, hands down.
Love Ren for that.
Ren
I know
would
so much
burn.
about poison.
Yeah. Again, I can relate. Who is most likely to fake their own death?
Ooh. Probably also Hal. I feel like he would just be like, I need to. I mean, maybe after this disastrous reality television show, he's like, I need to receive some die.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Definitely
Okay.
makes sense for The Bachelor. He just ends up with no one. He just leaves.
Yeah. He's like, where's Red? He's like looking, he's like, I can't
wanna
do
do
this
this
Oh, that's
So good.
lovely. Okay, so both of your books have a central romance, and in lieu of our theme of the month, we would love to hear about your romance writing journey. So, what drew you to writing romance?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I think probably I would chalk that up to my fandom background. So I didn't really write much original fiction until I was an upperclassman in college. I would say from ages like 9 to 18, I was on a lot of roleplay forums, and I don't know if those still exist, which maybe is like revealing my age a little bit. But essentially, for anyone who's listening who doesn't know, usually these were like online communities inspired by fandom. So like every member of the fandom would pick a character to portray, and then you would essentially like write a little collaborative story together. It was very fun. And I wrote a little bit of fan fiction, but I mostly read it and still do. And so I've always kind of carried that fan fiction sensibility with me into my writing. So deep focus on character, mostly on the romantic leads, lots of drawn out intimate moments, a very loose sense of plot sometimes. But yeah, I would say that's what drew me to romance.
Yeah. Love that. I mean, I used to do Percy Jackson roleplay, so I feel you on that. I was always like the equivalent of Annabeth, but like you weren't allowed to be Annabeth because like she was canon. So I was always basically the fake Annabeth. It was a really
Oh,
good
you
time.
always try to make your own characters. That's awesome.
I pretty much stole her whole entire personality, so it was a really good time. Yeah, but another thing that has actually been brought up somehow more frequently this season has been the topic of enemies to lovers over our little pod squad group. We talk about it a lot. What we've talked about is kind of how sometimes enemies to lovers can take a sort of toxic turn to it, where it's just like, oh, they like actually like really just like hate each other. And I will say, I think Down Comes the Night is an excellent example of an enemies to lovers, just where it's like their environments forcing them to be enemies as opposed to like their actual like feelings towards one another. So we wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on the enemies to lovers tropes as somebody who's written and published like a really good enemies to lovers?
Oh, thanks. No, that's an interesting question. I mean, as everyone here might expect, I love enemies to lovers. I think that there's so much like delicious built-in tension, and they have like a really nice arc that you can follow, like that, you know, reluctant allies to like maybe friends, and then as they open up to each other, like the blossoming into love where you have to reckon with your own perceptions and your worst impulses. Like there's just something so romantic about like loving, giving, you know, when they potentially hurt you. But I feel that. I mean, definitely some enemies to lovers romances can be like a little bit toxic. At the same time, like part of me wants to offer like, I guess it depends a little bit on the genre and the genre conventions. Like The Cruel Prince, for example, I guess is like, I think a great enemies to lovers romance. But because they're like in this cutthroat fairy world, like how to put it, I guess that like if you remove the characters from that setting, they would be so awful. But I feel like in real life, if we were to see Jude and Carden, we'd be like, these are really bad people. But like within the but within the context of that world, I feel like it still works, especially because neither Jude nor Carden, like both of them are equally terrible and both of them have like an equal amount of power in the relationship. I feel like where it starts to get dicey for me is like, I don't know, it's usually when the dude is like this like giant hulking monster and he's just like, I'm so evil and like you're just a powerless little girl, and I'm like, oh my god, guys. We don't see that one too often, but yeah, I guess that's where I'll offer my thoughts on enemies to lovers.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's when you get that like really imbalanced power dynamic that it just starts to go a bit like, whoa, okay, maybe step back a bit. So do you think, like sort of leading off of that topic, do you think romance writing can edge into a toxic or dangerous influence for young readers? How did you work to create healthy romances, say, between sworn enemies who'd like nothing more than to kill each other for young readers?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I think it's kind of complicated. It's not like the question is kind of like, do I think, dark romance can warp young people's expectations of what love is supposed to be like? And I don't know. I think it depends on the reader, obviously. Like some people have different limitations on what they can handle. Some people are going to internalize things more than others. In my experience, I feel like people are generally pretty good at distinguishing what they like to read versus what they would tolerate in real life. I mean, for example, The Cruel Prince, like I don't think very many young readers would be like, I just think it's so romantic when my love interest like bullies me viciously in front of all of you. But like on the other side, it's just like sometimes toxic relationships can be really thematically interesting. Like I don't know where y'all fall on the Darkling and Alina, because I feel like their relationship's so thematically interesting because like the Darkling is clearly a groomer and a manipulator, and like his whole goal through the entire series is to like systematically isolate her until like, what is the line? You have no shelter but mine. But he's also like really alluring and complicated and like wounded. And I think that's what makes him a great character and why so many people ship a Lurkling or whatever they call it, even though like he's a pretty unambiguously bad dude. He makes me laugh too. He's very dramatic. But this is just like a very roundabout way of me saying like I don't necessarily, I mean, to answer your question about how I approached it, I don't know if I necessarily see my role as an author of modeling healthy relationships necessarily. I think my responsibility is to lead young readers into difficult topics and thorny relationships with care, and to give them the tools and the language to contextualize and form their own judgments about what they're reading. So with Ren and Hal, similar to what I was just talking about, I wanted to make sure that neither of them had the moral high ground or more power over one another. Like, even though Hal has his deadly magic eyeballs, he's also just like sickly Victorian lad who like a strong breeze would blow him over and he needs to be fed soup. So I just like really wanted to emphasize like he can't really hurt her any more than she can hurt him. And I think there's just something unbearably intimate about being forced to literally take care of someone you despise. So that's how I approach the romance with those two.
That is a very cool look to have on that. But excuse me. Adding on to the idea of making these healthy bonds, we want to talk a little bit about platonic bonds. So your characters Ren and Una start out with this sort of complicated bond that morphs into like this beautiful friendship. And we want to know, how was writing that friendship and why do you think it was important to express it?
Ooh, yeah, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Their relationship was one of my favorites in the books to write, and it was, I think, also one of the most difficult just because they have so much history and they hurt each other a lot throughout the book. But what was important to me to depict is I was really interested in, like, those friendships you form with people at certain points in your life where you're kind of in a bad, like both of you are in a bad place, and you bond over that, and then when you kind of come out of it, you look at, and you're feeling more stable, and you look at each other and you're like, who are you? I don't really recognize you anymore. And so much of that friendship arc, kind of a exes to enemies to friends arc, was about both of them refusing to see each other clearly and give each other what they need. Like at the beginning of the book, both of them very much want the other to be something that they're not. And I didn't see a ton of friend breakups in YA fantasy in particular, and I went through so many of those in the years. So it felt right to kind of offer that experience to my readers. And I guess lastly, from a craft perspective, I feel like Una is kind of the embodiment of the emotional stakes. Like she represents everything Ren has wanted and has to kind of leave behind when she accepts the mysterious summons to Colwick Hall.
Yes. No, I loved the progression of Ren and Una's relationship. It was just like really like nice. Where like in the end you're like, oh, that was so cute. But speaking of platonic bonds, which YA for the most part has relied very heavily on the romance kind of bond, which isn't as realistic because in our daily lives we have lots of different relationships. Why do you think seeing different types of relationships is really important for young people?
Yeah, that is so fair and true. And it's been like that for a really long time. I feel like when I was reading YA when I was a teen, it was the heyday of paranormal romance. It's still kind of continued that YA is super romance driven. And I think that's partly a result of how authors and readers talk about books online. Like so much buzz is generated around like romance tropes, like, oh, you like enemies to lovers, like you love like the forced proximity, like read my book, add it on Goodreads, and like I've totally been like that too. But I think what's so important to your point about depicting different kinds of relationships is the way we talk about romance can be very limiting and even alienating, I think, to a lot of readers and even authors who don't gravitate to romance. I think there are a lot of books out there without romance, but they just don't get the same kind of online buzz or fanish devotion as the ones that do. So I think people read for all sorts of reasons, and I think it's pretty crucial that all types of readers are able to find the kind of books that they need, and seeing that full spectrum of what people experience, from friendship breakups to like found family friend groups to everlasting love to divorce to familial abuse to sibling bickering. Like all of this stuff is so crucial for people to see and be able to like contextualize their own experiences. I think just seeing all types of bonds helps us understand ourselves and each other a little bit better.
Yeah, I think we should start making like friendship tropes a big thing, like the friend who bullies the other friend, which is me and Ruby. So
Yeah.
we've already kind of said that already. Do you think writing healthy platonic bonds are as important as writing romance?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think all types are equally important to depict, and kind of what I would say too is like part of me feels like writing unhealthy bonds is also kind of important to me as an author, because in A Far Wilder Magic, one of the protagonists, Wes, he's one of 5 siblings, which was so much fun to write. And while they're super loving, they have their problems and their, sibling spats. But his family is a pretty sharp contrast to the other protagonists, Margaret, particularly Margaret and her mom, Evelyn. So part of what I was really interested in depicting in this book was overcoming abuse. So Margaret is a a survivor of neglect. And one of the most emotional moments of the book is this confrontation between Margaret and her mom. I'll avoid getting too spoilery, but essentially Margaret kind of outlines everything that she's experienced, all her feelings to her mom, and she's rejected. And that scene really sucked to write. But sometimes I feel like it can be hard to recognize that what you're experiencing isn't normal until you see somebody else going through it. Like, we as people are so reticent to offer ourselves kind of empathy and like outrage. We don't give that to ourselves, but we give that to our friends, people we care about. We can be like so cruel to ourselves and explain away our own pain. But when we recognize ourselves in somebody else and we feel angry about that, like, we can start to process it and give it a name. So for me, that's kind of like the reader writing, like showing them this full range, healthy and unhealthy. Like, I'm trying to reach out to my reader and say, like, I know what you've been through, and like, it's not acceptable and things can be better. So I think that was really important to juxtapose those like healthy and unhealthy platonic familial bonds.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you made. I mean, especially with the whole unhealthy family relationships. I mean, there's so many young people who read YA who experience that, and I think I totally agree. It's really important to show that in your writing, because when you read it, you can start processing it, and that's So that's sorry, I don't have a word for that. I just
I feel that, yeah.
yeah. Oh, geez. Okay, so what was your process in building these relationships for your characters? And was there something that drew you to these certain tropes, like the love triangle, the enemies to lovers, the one bed trope, etc.?
Oh, yeah. I mean, with tropes, I feel like, particularly with my first drafts, I'm always just writing to entertain. So it's like anything that makes me happy, it's going to go in there. So Down Comes the Night was very much a book I wrote when I had fallen out of writing. And so when I started the first draft, I was like, I'm just going to be wildly self-indulgent and put everything I love. Enemies to lovers, yes. Snowed in at the inn, oh yeah. Like, one bed, it's all going in there. And no one made me cut it, which was really surprising and makes me so happy. So yeah, I mean, readers love tropes too. But as for building the relationships, that's a great question. So my books usually come to me like the spark of the idea with the romantic leads. So I usually want to figure out what they're like and what their dynamic is. So with Down Comes the Night, I knew Ren was like a little bit prickly and super emotional, and Hal was like the brooding, tortured love interest that we all love so much. And I knew they were enemies. So then the question becomes, how do I make these people fall in love? And for Ren and Hal, not only were those tropes that I love, they were also like tropes that fall under the umbrella of forced proximity. So how could I force them to spend time together and be more vulnerable? And then, I guess the only other thing I'll offer for any of the writers out there, there's a great blog called Helping Writers Become Authors by K.M. Weiland. And one of the coolest things I learned from her was how to plan character arcs. And her theory of them is that every character has a lie that they believe, which is essentially some fundamental misconception they have about themselves or the world. And by the end of the story, they should learn truth, which is just, I guess, what it sounds like, the opposite of the lie, like the lesson they need to learn. And so with writing romance, I like to try to make parallel so that each character helps the other one start to learn the truth. So Ren and Hal both are super emotionally, or they've come to believe that emotions make them weak. And throughout the story, they kind of teach each other that is absolutely not the case, and emotions are the things that make us strongest, etc. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question that's not on the script? You talk
Yes.
about planning. Are you a plotter or are you a pantser?
I'm a disastrous plotter. I try so hard. I make these extensive outlines, and do I follow them? Yes. Do they come out good in execution? No. So why do I keep doing it? I don't know, but it does help me. I like to, I do it scene by scene, so I always know where I'm going. So I have to revise a lot, but yes, I do plot.
Yes. Okay, I love that. Just for
Betrayal.
context, all three of us. So I'm a plotter. So me and you, yeah. And then Kat is a pantser and Ray's a plancer. So like in between. So our first episode was literally us fighting. Our first episode was literally us fighting about what was the best method. We came to the conclusion that your best method is whatever method works for you. But, you know,
Yeah,
that was the
absolutely.
happy friendship finale. But, you know, we're liars. We still fight about it. So, just for a little context for the controversy of that question. And my victorious, like, yes!
Yes, victory for the plotters.
Yes, for us.
I
Yeah,
don't know,
but
I could pants a novel. Like, y'all are built different. Like, what? Like, I don't even know what I would confronted with the blank page. Like, they would just be. I don't even know. They'd be walking around looking at trees for 500 pages.
oh,
I mean, that's what happens in my drafts. Nothing happens. It's a lot of confusion.
And that's so valid.
I tried pantsing a novel for Nano last year in
Oh,
2021. But it did not go well. It did not go well.
No, I think I might die if I tried to pants, but maybe one of these days I'll try it, see how it goes. I don't think it's gonna work at all, but you never know. Yeah.
Things up.
Yeah, well, I love everything that you said about like just about how you build your relationships. It's just like really cool. I also love the KM Wyland blog. That's a really good blog. I've read that. It's good.
Yeah.
I've been reading her stuff for years. It's so helpful. So I love that you recommended that. And we also love that they let you keep those tropes in. We love it. Oh my gosh. When they got to the inn, I was like, one bed.
I know.
So excited. I was so excited. But what would you like to see more of in romance writing and platonic relationships as well? Just like in relationships in especially YA, what do you think there needs to be more of?
Oh, that's a good question. So I was thinking about this, and so this is adult, but I recently read A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross, which is lovely. So if you like her YA novels, she wrote, oh my gosh, Dreams Lie Beneath, I think is her most recent piece. But in any case, in A River Enchanted, there are two characters who are married, and but their marriage is a little not great. So over the course of the book, they kind of reconnect and re-fall in love with each other, and I thought that was just so sweet. And I don't think you really see, I mean, even in YA, like, you don't see a lot of established relationships, like characters who are already dating, or what have you, at the beginning of the book. So I think it would be cool to see more romance that kind of, especially in fantasy, which is mostly what I read, that kind of explore like a relationship where that baseline trust and knowledge of each other is already there, as opposed to like characters dating for the time. That's what I would love to see in romance. In terms of platonic, I mean, I always love giant families. As someone who grew up, my mom was 7, so always lots of cousins and aunts and uncles, and like so many people. Oh my god! And of course, chaotic friend groups are always welcome. So
We're a chaotic friend group.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can tell.
yeah, and I love it. It's great.
So, on the flip side of that question, what irks you in romance writing? Do you have any pet peeves that when you read it, you're like, nope, I'm getting out of here?
Not really. There are some tropes I don't like as much as others, but I feel like I'm always open to like there being a story that will convince me. Like in general, I don't go in for second chance romance. But I feel like These Violent Delights is almost like a second chance romance in some ways. I haven't read these Our Violent Ends yet because I'm too scared So I don't know, maybe I'll be proven wrong about that. But yeah, nothing in particular that is like, no, absolutely not. There are things that I find funny. Like I don't read a ton of like straight up rom-coms or romance novels, but there was a tweet I saw the other day that was just so true. People got very upset at him, but that's a different conversation. But he was just observing the trend lately of like romance heroes being like, I guess it's just because everybody loves Adam Driver. Like, so that the love interest who is just like 7 feet tall and just like built like a fridge. And like, we're just like, he's so tall. He's huge. Like, I can't believe how huge this man is. And I'm like, it's so funny. I love it. But yeah, that's not.
Oh
Adam Driver.
goodness.
No, isn't the love hypothesis like literally?
That's
Kylo Ren?
literally what I was thinking of.
Yeah, that's what immediately came to mind. I was like, oh, love hypothesis. Shout
Yeah.
out to Adam. Motivated publishing industry. What a king.
Okay, so on the flip side, do you have a favorite trope? Or maybe a trope you're scared to write in?
Ooh, I think my favorite trope is always some variation of like mutual obliviousness and mutual pining. Like each character like is completely in love with the other one, but they surely don't feel the same way. For when I'm scared of writing, I feel like I would love to write like a really epic in scope, like lovers to enemies, back to lovers. But I'm so tender-hearted and soft. I don't know if I could actually lovers to enemies part. Like it would hurt me too much. But I think it would be really cool.
Honestly, same. I feel like I would write it. I would make them too nice to each other. They'd be like, they're not even enemies. They're just like friends.
They're a little bit rude to each other every now and again.
They just exchange banters. You know, I don't think I'm ready for the Chloe Gong, like they're literally stabbing each other level. I don't think I'd do it right.
Yes, she hurts so much, but so yeah, I admire her.
Romeo and Juliet. She's so cool, yeah. But we also heard that you received a master's degree in English literature, which that's awesome. But we wanted to ask, are there any benefits that you feel like it's provided you in your writing, and are there any drawbacks you feel it's provided?
Not really in terms of like my writing. I feel like they're very different skill sets. Like we read just a lot of continental philosophy and literary criticism, which is really cool. And I read a bunch of novels that I wouldn't have read otherwise that gave me some sparks for ideas, like The Triplicate Goddess and Down Comes the Night, inspired by some of the literary criticism I had read about a Eudora Welty short story called Moon Lake. But other than that, the drawbacks, a lot of debt. That's the drawback of a degree. But, you know, it was a really nice time to hang out with a bunch of cool people in New Orleans. So I don't regret it at all.
I feel like we should point out that Kat's in university right now.
I know, literally make me cry. But to be fair, I'm in UK university, so I don't have as much debt as you guys do. So
Okay, well, that's good.
I'm still a little tear just trickled out.
I'm sorry, too real for this Saturday morning.
Okay, before I start crying, your new book is another fantasy with Jewish representation. How was that writing for you, and what would you like to see more of in terms of Jewish representation?
Oh, great question. Writing it was really great. It was also hard and vulnerable in ways I wasn't really expecting. A lot of Margaret's experiences reflect mine, and I still struggle with that worry. I feel like author who's marginalized shares of like, am I enough, to write this particular story? But I think we can never hope to capture the whole experience, just our particular entry point into it. So Margaret, for me, I was really interested in capturing that sense of dislocation. So Margaret experiences anti-Semitism but she's kind of lost touch with the Jewish side of her family, which would have connected her to community and faith, its traditions. So writing this book was digging pretty deep into like those feelings of isolation and long, but also on the more positive side, this quest to understand like herself and the world, and that's kind of what felt most true to me as a Jew. Is we always want to learn more about Judaism. It's as a diaspora group, it's so hard to feel that sense of dislocation. And I hope it resonates with readers. In terms of what I would like to see more of, Jewish fantasy of all kinds. Jews of color, secular Jews, observant Jews, groups other than Ashkenazi Jews. That would be awesome. Because the first time I saw a Jew of any kind in fantasy that wasn't like a goblin or some other like stereotype that fantasy writers don't really realize that they're perpetuating, was Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, which is my all-time favorite books. If you have not read it, I would highly recommend it. And then later with Ava Reed's The Wolf and the Woodsman, which has a patrilineal protagonist. Both that's also absolutely wonderful, and Ava is a friend of mine. But yeah, we are seeing a little burst of Jewish fantasy. Like this year in particular, we've got Rebecca Podos's like From Dust to Flame, Aidan Pollit's Bone Weaver, Kaelin Josephson's This Dark Descent. So we're in a little golden era, and I'm really excited to contribute to it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point you made, that no one experience fits everyone's experience. You know, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. But speaking of representation, Down Comes the Night is also known for having a lot of LGBTQ representation. So we want to know, how is that process, and what would you like to see more of in terms of that rep?
Ren, on the other hand, felt a little bit more natural to write, because I'd kind of, Margaret was the first Jewish protagonist I'd written, whereas Ren, like, the books that we do not speak of before Down Comes the Night that I never revise, those were all FF. So I was definitely more comfortable with writing sapphic protagonists. And Ren is very much a character I wrote for myself at 15. So I think baby Allison would have really liked to see a bi protagonist who was like comfortable with her sexuality and loved and accepted unconditionally. In terms of rep, I mean, I feel like there's just so many wonderful, brilliant, exciting queer books out there right now that have a wide range of experiences. And there's also a lot of bloggers and other bookish creators who are doing work to kind of hype up these books. Like Reed's Rainbow is one of my absolute favorite blogs. Y'all should check them out if you haven't. They like come out with these lists that are hundreds of books long, all of the queer books coming out this year. So I think really for me, like my greatest wish is that publishers keep supporting these books, because some publishers do a better job than others promoting and make sure that these get in front of readers, and that readers keep. Yeah, there's so much good stuff out there, and yeah.
I love Reeds of Rainbow. It is such a good blog.
Yeah.
It's so good. I love it. But in general, what advice would you give to aspiring writers, romance or otherwise?
I think my biggest piece of advice for any writer is really just to pursue what brings you joy. I've gone through periods where I've been super burnt out and down on my work, and the thing that has always brought me back is just leaning into the purely self-indulgent things, right? Staying true to your vision. I think passion always shines through.
That's a great message, and one that the podcast definitely agrees with. As we have had episodes talking about why it's just really important to just write what you like, not what you think the market would like or what you think other people are going to read. As we close, we'd love to know more about A Far Wilder Magic pre-order campaign. What can you tell us about the opportunities listeners have right now if they buy a copy?
Yes, absolutely. So A Far Wilder Magic is coming out in the US and the UK. So you can order either hardback and any other variety book, audiobook, etc. And the UK has a paperback coming out. So if you buy any of those editions, submit your receipt to me. All the details are on my website, and if you submit your receipt, I will send you 3 tarot cards. They are very lovely. I have on my shelf. Probably can't see them though. And then a signed bookplate, which the artist hand carved and then like stamped and then scanned it in. It's very beautiful. And then if you order from my local indie bookstore, Kepler's Books and Magazines, you will get all of that plus an exclusive print. And I will sign your book and I can personalize it with whatever you'd like, including doodles. But I really am not an artist, so I make no promise as to the quality of the doodle.
I'm gonna request a doodle now. But pre-ordering is something, obviously, that authors talk about a lot. So we thought it would be great if you could explain quickly why pre-ordering is important for authors, and especially debut authors.
Yeah, especially for debuts. There's so many reasons to pre-order, especially now in our pandemic times. A lot of people are moving their book buying online instead of browsing. So if you pre-order books, it is very good for the algorithm on retail sites, Amazon, Book Depository, any of these. The more pre-orders a book gets, the higher it can appear on the algorithm, show it to readers. So by pre-ordering a book, you are allowing it to get in front of more people. And if enough people pre-order, sometimes that can cause retailers to increase their orders. Some indie bookstores might not order an author's book at all until somebody pre-orders from that store, and then they might be like, oh, there's interest for this, I should stock it on the shelf. And sometimes publishers will even bump their marketing support if there's enough early interest from readers. So pre-ordering is definitely one of the best things you can do to support authors and ensure that they can keep writing books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pre-ordering is definitely that kind of snowball effect, and it can get literally hundreds of books requested and printed before it ever hits the shelves. So you should definitely go pre-order A Far Wilder Magic. I probably will once I can talk to my mom and get her money. I'm kidding. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry.
That's a spirit.
And once I can talk to myself and convince myself to stop buying Graves and
Oh,
get some money.
independent.
Uni is tough. Especially now that book tours are less frequent and more advertising is done virtually, it is increasingly more important to support authors, whether that be through posting about books you like on your writergram. We all have one here, right, guys? And following writers on social media, requesting a copy at your local library, or buying their book before the release date. So go on, guys. Support your authors. Support Allison. She's great. She's on this podcast. It's amazing.
And
Right,
where
right.
can our listeners find you on social media?
Oh, I am at Allison H. Saft on Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and on TikTok, but I do not post anything. I just look at memes. But I'm there.
You know what? Same. Well, Allison, this has just been an absolute pleasure. We're so grateful that you've come on and just talked to us and honestly given us so much of your wonderful knowledge. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I'm sure all our listeners have as well. So thank you. This has been wonderful. Yeah, but I'm stealing Ray's line today. Until next time, writing cadets, we'll see you on our next adventure.
That's it.
That's a wrap.
Yes, thank you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Moving Right Along podcast, made possible by the Young Writers Initiative. You can follow us on Instagram at Moving Right Along Podcast or find us on tywi.org. And if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to give us a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Thank you to our team, without whom this wouldn't be possible. Our Grump, Simone, our Sunshine, Jasmine, and our Enemies to Lovers, Cassette. All music is by Kevin MacLeod at filmmusic.io. Today you heard Beauty Flow. And all sound effects are from the Freesound Project.